here. We are excited to listen to you. This is a good. I hope this webinar will be, more useful.
We are very excited to attend you.
Sure,
Very,
sure. Thank you so much. Likewise, the feeling is mutual. Very
thank,
excited to be here.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to you all for this very special masterclass on digital marketing. The world has become increasingly digital centric since lockdowns, quarantines, and social distancing requirements and enforcements. Brands and organizations need to think about what is best approach to digital marketing specifically for them and then work on executing it successfully for their target audience. We are delighted to have in our midst Mr. Vedanarayanan Vedantam, SME and Startup Head Razorpay, to take us through these various aspects of digital marketing. A graduate from SPJIMR Mumbai and INSEAD Singapore's CMO Academy, he has helped build and grow multiple digital products and brands across health tech, edtech, and online travel. He possesses a varied mix of global experiences spanning digital marketing, brand consulting, product management, and business development. Veda consults early age startups directly or through incubators on branding, digital marketing, and helps them evaluate product market fitment. He is visiting faculty to top B schools such as IIM Bangalore, IIM Indore, IIM Kashipur, SPJIMR Mumbai, Flame University Pune, Institute of Product Leadership, to name a few. A very distinguished speaker at digital conferences worldwide on various topics. His most popular speaking engagements include Arab E-commerce Summit Dubai, E-tail Asia and Singapore, Strategy Planning Innovation Summit New York, Digital Marketing Innovation Summit, Asian Strategic Leader Institute's Tourism Summit Kuala Lumpur, and Scandinavian E-Business Summit Sweden. The session will include an hour and 15 minutes talk by Mr. Veda, followed by a 15 minutes question and answer session. You may post your queries in the chat box. So without further delay, I would now invite Mr. Vedantam to take it forward from here. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Anjum, and a big hello to all of the participants who turned up here on a Saturday evening. I know our country is going through a lot of difficulty, and in this difficult time, I hope all of you are doing safe. Your loved ones are safe and sound. Your employees, your co-workers, everybody is safe and sound. Thank you so much for taking time. Let me just quickly share my screen. Give me a quick moment. And thank you for those kind words, Anjum. Big thank you to Tai Chandigarh and to Anjum and to Tai Chandigarh's leadership for having invited me over here. Just give me a second. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much once again for this opportunity. Just to quickly introduce myself, I take care of the SME and the startup business practice at Razorpay. Also serve as a marketing mentor, work with various TIE chapters, just like TIE Chandigarh, Atal Innovation Mission with the Government of India. And of course, I teach marketing at quite a few B schools, Bangalore, IIM Bangalore, Indore, and Kashipur. Over the next hour, a little over an hour or so, this is what I have planned for you. What we will start off by doing is we look back on the year that was, right? 2020 as a year was a roller coaster journey for most of us, and we certainly need to acknowledge the effects of the T-Rex in the room, right? The Tyrannosaurus Rex, so to speak. Before we get into that, we look at a couple of very interesting inflection points, digital inflection points that happened for the first time in the year 2020. I'm not going to bore you with the regular stats that all of us know, right? India is amongst the world's fastest growing digital economies, largest economies, etc. But these are a couple of very interesting inflection points that kind of slip below the radar, but have pretty wide-ranging ramifications. We look at that. Then what we will also look at is we look at the impact of the T-Rex, right? The elephant, the Tyrannosaurus Rex in the room, which is the pandemic itself, on the startup and the SME ecosystem in the country. We'll then look at a couple of different forks in the road. One is we will look at from an acquisition perspective. So as a marketer, as a business owner, from a marketing perspective, there are two primary problem statements you solve करने के लिए कोशिश कर रहे हो. One essentially is on acquisition, right? How do you acquire new customers using digital? So we look at that, and this is a consistent point of feedback that I often hear from every single SME or a startup entrepreneur that I interact with, wherein they say that they understand all the aspects of digital, but what they need to know is for their dhanda, for their business, what needs to be the number one priority, right? Because not everybody is VC funded. Most startups and SMEs are bootstrapped. They have limited time, limited resources, in terms of money, in terms of people, in terms of focus and mind space. So they want to know for their dhanda, what needs to be the number one priority. So I'll give you some simple rules of thumb on the basis of which you can make these kinds of prioritization decisions. And I used to lead marketing previously for Healthify Me, and I'll take you through a small caselet of what we did at Healthify Me from an acquisition perspective. We then shift tracks and focus on engagement and nurturing. From an engagement and nurture perspective, what are some of the best practices? Now, what are the things to keep in mind? And we'll also go through a caselet from Simplilearn. I used to lead marketing globally for Simplilearn. I'll take you through a case study there. And then we'll take you through one of my own personal favorite sections, the need for repeat business, why that's important. I'll take you through again two small caselets, one a failure caselet. I did believe it back then, and I believe it even more now, that we learn a lot more from our failures than we do from our successes. So I'll take you through a small failure caselet. And then I'll also take you through a success story of how we managed to turn around the repeat business problem statement. And then towards the end, we'll have a bonus feature where we talk about the ways and means, the various ways and means by which you can create digital exposure for your brand. Okay, to start off with some of the interesting inflection points that happened in the year 2020 for the first time, right, which essentially point to the kind of explosive growth that digital has seen over the last year or so. The first one is this. In India, the term Google search and search are almost synonymously, because Google has an absolute and total monopoly of the market, as most of us might know. And unlike a few other developed markets where there is some level of market share that some of the competitors have, in India, it's a complete and absolute monopoly. But for the first time ever in the year 2020, for the first time ever in the year 2020, the Google search via the browser web was no longer the number one numero uno logical entry point for Indians looking to discover the World Wide Web. It became the Google Play Store search, which became the number one entry point for Indians looking to discover www, which has pretty interesting ramifications for entrepreneurs and business owners, because it means that if you're looking to build a digital brand presence, the mobile app needs to be front, middle, and center of that strategy. And it also has pretty interesting implications for digital marketers. It means that mobile marketing needs to play a very important role in your overall digital marketing strategy. Moving on, the second inflection point, which also happened, again, a lot of people didn't take notice of this, but it again happened during the year 2020, was this. What you see here are the various phases. The marketers in the room might be able to relate with this. These are the various phases that a prospect goes through as part of their brand consideration life cycle, right? So if Anjum is evaluating a brand, initially awareness is seated in her mind about a particular brand before she creates a long list of various brands which move into a consideration set, right? Wherein she develops some kind of affinity towards a particular brand. Then she moves into a short list of specific brands which is looking to evaluate to make a purchase. And then the holy grail of action where Anjum picks out her wallet, picks out a credit or debit card and makes a payment, right? Which is the action. Now, despite the huge growth of digital in India over the last decade, it was this extremely popular symbol, the television set, which was the number one numero uno reach building mechanism when it came to building brand awareness in the country. It was not digital. But in the year 2020, also accelerated by the pandemic, that changed. When for the first time, the television was no longer the number one medium, it actually moved a step further down and became more of a brand reinforcement avenue. And all of these very popular digital symbols, right, which need no introduction, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, they became the number one in India for the first time ever. Again, attest to the huge growth that digital has seen over the last year. Now, as I said, we're going to look at the impact that the pandemic has had on the startup and the SME ecosystem in the country. And at Razorpay, we often think of ourselves as an index fund that sits on top of the entire startup and the SME ecosystem, because we process the entire cycle of money movement for all startups, both the inward money movement cycle through our suite of payments products, payment gateway, payment link, payment pages, and the outward money movement cycle through our suite of neo-banking solutions, which provide a suite of business banking solutions that allow businesses to be able to pay out funds to vendor partners, raw material suppliers, have current account relationships, working capital, commercial cards, etc. And we have a vantage position to have a ringside perspective of what's happening across the startup and the SME ecosystem. And at Razorpay, we've observed that we've seen a huge boom, obviously, of e-commerce, but we've also seen a huge boom of edtech and health tech startups. I'm sure there must be a lot of startups here in this crowd right now who are from EdTech and health tech. We also seen a boom of IT SaaS companies in gaming, and this is intuitive, right? Because people are stuck at home because of the pandemic. They want ways and means to upskill and reskill themselves, which explains the growth of EdTech. People are stuck at home because of the pandemic, and they want ways and means to discover healthier and fitter versions of themselves, which explains the growth of health tech. Some other interesting trends is the fact that the persona of the average startup and the SME entrepreneur seems to have materially changed, if not significantly. Earlier, the persona of the SME or the startup entrepreneur is very similar to a Harshil or a Shashank, the co-founders of the celebrated co-founders of Razorpay, or a Sachin or a Binny Bansal, the celebrated co-founders of Flipkart, but who understood the importance of digital and the need for building a digital business, and understood the nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritties of digital and tech. But the new age SME entrepreneur understands the importance of digital, but they don't necessarily understand, nor do they care about the nitty-gritties and the nuts and bolts of coding and technology and digital. They want all of that complexity abstracted away from them, and they are looking for platforms which helps abstract away that complexity while still giving them a best user experience and still allowing them to give the best user experience to their end customers. Which is why at Razorpay we've launched a slew of these hashtag no-code products, as we call, right? Payment page, payment link, payment buttons, which do not require the hassle of integration. They can be used in under 5 minutes, and they have essentially democratized access to digital payments. And they've been a big hit because entrepreneurs, they don't know coding, they don't know technology, but these have been a big hit with the startup and the SME entrepreneur persona. We've seen a huge growth from tier 2, tier 3 and below, which has been again particularly interesting. It's not just about Bangalore and Mumbai and Hyderabad and Chennai and Delhi. We're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs setting up businesses servicing local economies there through digital, which are coming up in these tier 2, tier 3 towns. Local vernacular is playing a big part. The other interesting thing that we have seen is that we are not just seeing more and more new businesses come on board, but we are seeing them process more monies through the Razorpay ecosystem, which again points to the fact that these are not flaky fly-by-night operators, these startups and SMEs, but these are businesses with strong business fundamentals and product market fit in place. And the earlier set lifecycle pattern that a digital business used to follow was, let me set up a digital storefront first, website, Instagram page, Facebook page, then I'll think of digital payments as an afterthought. But now people are skipping a step, right? They're in a hurry to start receiving digital payments. And which is why a product like a payment page has been a big hit, because it's a 2-in-1. It helps businesses set up a digital brand presence and serves as a payment collection. It's been a big hit again with the masses. And we're observing these kinds of headwinds across both the inward money movement cycle, where businesses receive funds from their end customers, and the outward money movement cycle, which has been extremely heartening as we look ahead to the next 12, 24, and 36 months. Now, moving ahead, as I said, the pandemic has brought digital to the forefront like never before. And like I mentioned earlier, the consistent point of feedback that I often hear from every single startup and entrepreneur, business owner that I interact with is that unko samajh aati hai the various aspects of digital, right? SEO kya hai, SEM kya hai, what is Facebook advertising, what is LinkedIn advertising, but what they need help with is knowing for their dhanda what needs to be the number of priority. And I've listed here some of the usual suspects, the popular names, right? You've got Facebook, SEM, SEO, and LinkedIn, which I'm sure most of you would have heard of. But for those of you who might not have, let me do a quick 30 to 60 second crash course on SEO and SEM. I'm sure most of you here know of Facebook and LinkedIn advertising anyway. But let's say that Anjum is looking to plan a holiday and she wants to go to, say, Kulu Manali, right? She wants to go to Kulu Manali from Chandigarh. She searches for resorts in Kulu Manali. Let's assume that there is no COVID in our country and everything is normal. And Anjum is looking to plan a holiday in Kulu Manali. She's searching for resorts in Kulu Manali. Now, every time somebody searches for something on Google, a real-time virtual auction happens. Very similar to an auction in the real world. Let's say I'm looking to auction this OnePlus phone. Right, you have various people bidding various prices for it in a very similar fashion. In this case, you have various advertisers looking to bid for the right to serve their advertisement as the first for that particular keyword that Anjum has just entered on Google. Now, let's say that in this case, Make My Trip has bid $100 for that keyword. Booking.com has bid $200. Now there are various parameters that go into determining whose ad comes up on top, but for the most part, it is determined by whoever bids the highest. So in this case, just to keep the example simple and not to complicate things, Booking.com, because it's bid $200, their ad comes up on top. So Anjum would see a bunch of listings. The first few listings would have an ad tag against them on Google. All of these are essentially search engine marketing advertisements. Now, all of the efforts that you as a marketer undertake to make sure that your advertisements keep bubbling up higher on when somebody searches for relevant keywords on Google search, which you are bidding for, is referred to as search engine marketing. And all of this is managed through a platform which Google provides, which is absolutely free, which is called Google AdWords. Now, if say Anjum were to click on the booking.com ad, booking.com gets charged $200 only if a user clicks on it, right? Which is cost per click advertising. If she had to click on the Make My Trip ad, Make My Trip would have been charged $100 by Google. Now that is SEM. Now, if Anjum were to scroll a little further down in that search listing, she believes these are advertisements, they can't be trusted. She sees a bunch of listings which do not have the ad tag listed against them. These are called organic listings, and these are based purely on merit. Sirf merit pe hai, paise pe nahi hai. So this is purely based on what Google's organic search ranking algorithm determines are the most relevant to that user search query, which is the landing page, which is the website that has the most relevant content, the freshest content, which has the best user experience, which is the one that loads really quickly, which is the one that has the maximum number of backlinks from other authoritative sources. So basically, Google needs to get confidence that this page is the most relevant for this user's query. So that could be a small bootstrap startup. I don't know how many of you remember this name called Thrillophilia, right? A very popular travel tech startup, bootstrapped, right? Didn't raise $1 in VC funding, doesn't have deep pockets like a Make My Trip or a Booking.com or a GoIbibo. Bilkul paisa nahi hai unke paas, bootstrapped hai. They started it at 10 lakhs, right? 10 lakh a capital pay. And they used to always beat every single top travel tech player when it came to SEO. Bilkul paisa nahi tha. They wouldn't spend $1 or a rupee in marketing on Google AdWords, but on SEO, they always used to come up on top because their content was the richest. Their websites, their landing pages were the most optimized for SEO, and their content was the most relevant, which they used to keep refreshing. User experience was really good. It used to load really quickly. So Google's organic algorithm would always bubble them up first. Now, if Anjum were to click on one of these listings, that brand would not get charged any money because this doesn't have any CPC cost attached to it. Yep, I hope that's clear. So about what SEM and SEO are. Having said that context, now let's try and understand. Let's say Anjum runs a dhanda and she understands all of this, but she wants to know whether ये सब ठीक है. अब आप मुझे ये बताओ मेरे धंधे के लिए number one priority कैसे मैं decide करूं? How do I decide which is my number one priority? So the first question that the entrepreneur needs to ask himself or herself is in order to know which needs to be the number one priority is the category or the product that I am operating in, is that mass or is that niche? That's the first question. Now, you can answer this through various ways, right? One is you have the entrepreneur's gut-based instinct. The entrepreneur knows that the category or the space that I operate in is mass. I sell t-shirts online, I'm mass, right? I sell mental wellness courses online, I'm probably niche, right? So the entrepreneur has that gut-based instinct on the basis of which they can make that decision. That is one way, which is the subjective way. The other way, in order to also answer this question and know if you're on the right track, is to have a more objective, data-backed approach. Wherein you open up Google AdWords again, which has a tool called as the Keyword Planner. You open up Keyword Planner, and in that you search for specific keyword sets which are relevant to your dhanda. Say online, mental wellness classes, or online selling t-shirts online, buy t-shirts online, and you see the number of keyword searches happening in your target geography. Let's say that is India in a given month. Now, it's not a perfect science. It is a grayscale. It's not a binary. It's not black or white. But if you can safely assume that for a market which is of the size of India, if the average monthly keyword searches are less than 15,000 a month, you can assume that the category or the space that you operate in to be niche. If it is more than 15,000 a month, you can assume it to be mass. Now, if you're mass, what do? Let's assume that you're mass, scenario one, right? If you're mass, you're operating in a category which already has a lot of, which it means that you're operating in a category which already has a lot of keyword demand patterns, user behavior patterns already set on Google. So it makes sense. It's just practical, common sense and intuitive for you to ride that wave, to piggyback on that user demand, which is already there. Now, not all of us can be an Amazon or a Flipkart, and we may not be able to create new user behavior. Right? But what we can very well do is piggyback and ride existing waves and piggyback on existing user behavior patterns. Now, there is already a lot of user behavior pattern out there on Google. So it makes sense for us to ride that wave. So if you are mass, you make Google, which is a combination of both SEM and SEO, your number one priority. Yeah. Now, what happens if you're not so lucky? What happens if you're niche? You don't directly run into Facebook's arms. But what you do is you ask yourself an additional question. I'm niche, yes, but the category that I'm operating in, do I have the opportunity to strike a very strong personal connect with my end customer? Can I strike a very strong emotional chord with my end customer? Can I do I as a marketer have the opportunity to inject a very strong visual element in my marketing communications? For example, when I first joined Healthify Me, just for context, Healthify Me happens to be India's largest health and fitness mobile application with over 20 million users. And it is a freemium app, right? And the freemium stands for free plus premium. The free services involves it has a calorie counting service, and it has the world's largest database of Indian foods that are mapped in the backend. So let's say that Anjum has had a plate of aloo paratha for breakfast today. She can tag that and she can know how many calories she's consumed for breakfast today. Like she's done a set of Surya Namaskars today morning, she can clock that and she can know how many calories she has burnt. Along with the breakfast, she can know how many minerals, vitamins, carbs, protein she has consumed, etc. And this is for any exotic Indian food from any corner of the country. Assam, Gujarat, Mizoram, Lakshadweep, Andaman, Kanyakumari, any part of the country, right? All of them are mapped. So it makes people a lot more mindful of their eating habits, workout patterns, and it is a calorie counter or a daily diary of sorts when it comes to food and workouts. That is free. The premium service involves through the app, personalized diet, fitness, and yoga plans, which are crafted according to the health goals of that particular individual, which is premium, which is paid for. Now, in the Healthify Me case, I had a big culture shock when I first joined Healthify Me, because for the first time in my life, it was Facebook, which was the number one dhanda driver, which was actually driving ROI for the business. Because in all of my previous experiences, Facebook had worked more as a brand building channel. It had never worked as a hard-working dhanda driver. It was always Google, which was the leader there. And that was because Healthify Me as an app was enabling people to lose weight or to overcome any kind of lifestyle diseases that they might have, and enabling them to discover healthier and fitter versions of themselves. If you're addressing a person's health, it is as close to the identity of an individual as you can get. We're enabling a 45-something working professional who's developed a beer belly, right, and who's put on a lot of weight, has hypertension, diabetes due to a sedentary lifestyle. We're helping that person lose weight, overcome hypertension, overcome diabetes. We're helping a 30-something young mother who's put on a lot of post-pregnancy body fat to lose that weight and rediscover her old confidence. We're enabling a 20-something young man to muzzle up and get a six-pack app, right, for example. So we're enabling something which is very close to the identity of an individual. So we have the opportunity as a brand, because of the category and the space that we operate in, to strike a very strong personal connect with our users. Plus, as a brand, we did very little talking ourselves. All of our talking was testimonial-led, was video-led, and it was all of these work really well on Facebook because they strike very strong empathy. So, and the kind of communication that we did, just give me 1 second, please. The kind of communication that we did, and it was very targeted. So if it was a 45-something person, that person would see a communication on Facebook featuring a testimonial having a persona which was from his age bracket. A 20-something person would see an advertisement on Facebook. It would be targeted, featuring a persona which was from his age bracket. So we made sure that it was hyper targeted. It drove a lot of empathy. All of these would work really well on Facebook. And that was the reason why Facebook worked really well for us. So if you're operating in a category where you have the opportunity to strike a very strong personal connect, and you can inject a strong visual element which can drive a lot of empathy in your communication, Facebook can be your number one channel. If you're on B2B, you make LinkedIn your number one channel. And in the case of Facebook, again, it works really well for proactive health tech, the space that a Healthify Me or a Cult Fit operates in. Or it also works well for fashion tech, right? Which is again a high involvement purchase, strikes a very strong emotional chord, the space that a Myntra or a Nykaa operates in, right? In these cases, Facebook would work really well. Now, what happens if you aren't that lucky? Your niche, and also because of the nature of the category you're operating in, you don't have the opportunity to strike a very strong personal connect with users, right? It's a double whammy of sorts, and this can still happen, and you can't take it personally. That's just the nature of the category. I'll give you an example. At Razorpay, we operate in this space, right? At Razorpay, we are a B2B payments company. We are not in peer-to-peer payments. We're not Google Pay. We're not PhonePe. We enable businesses to receive funds from their end customers, right? Who's our target persona? It is people like you, right? Entrepreneurs, small business owners, large business owners, etc. Now, the keyword demand for this isn't a lot, right? So it is niche. It's not mass by any stretch of the imagination. Plus, let's face it, an entrepreneur doesn't wake up in the morning and get excited about the fact that they're going to use a payments product, right? A payment gateway, for example, or a payment link or a payment page or a payment button, right? So it is not high on personal connect. It's just the nature of the category. There's nothing wrong with the brand, just the nature of the category. Unlike, say, weight loss, right? Which is very close to the identity of an individual. Then what do you do? It's niche, right? So what do I do? So we create content, obviously at Razorpay, we create content for the relevant keyword pools that are relevant to the dhanda itself, which is right payments, which is the dhanda, the space that we operate in. But the sandbox there is limited. We don't have too many people searching for that. As I said, it's niche. Keyword search volume there is low. But what we also do is I also create content for keyword pools which have significantly higher demand, which even if not relevant to the dhanda, to the business in the here and the now, is still relevant for my target customer. The target customer is entrepreneur. So I create content related for topics related to entrepreneurship, which has much higher keyword volume. I create content related to GST and compliance, which is a big question mark that a lot of entrepreneurs have. They don't understand GST. I create a lot of first-time entrepreneurs. They don't know how to read balance sheet and P&L. I create content around that. I create content around how to use digital marketing to grow your business. How do you use growth hacks for growing your business? How do you build a digital brand presence? So all of these have nothing to do with payments. Usko koi relevance nahi hai for Razorpay, but it is relevant for my customer, and they have much higher keyword demand volume. So it gives my brand the opportunity to gain access to a larger volume of eyeballs, to a larger market by creating content, which is speaking to that audience. I'm not getting irrelevant audiences though, right? I'm still getting relevant entrepreneurs as part of my funnel. And what I do is I get them in as part of the funnel, and then I engage and nurture them over a period of time and convert them into a customer for my payments product. So they may not become customers in the near term, but over time, I will engage and nurture them so that they end up becoming paying customers. So that's the strategy here. In summary, if you're operating in a mass space, make Google your number one priority. If you're operating in a niche space, which also has which affords you as a brand the opportunity to strike a very strong personal connect with your end customer, you make Facebook your number one priority. If you're at B2B, of course, it's LinkedIn. Or if you're speaking to working professionals, like in the Simplilearn case, you make your number one priority. The third category is if you're niche and you're unfortunate enough to be in a category which does not give you the ability to strike a very strong personal connect with your end customer, then what you do is you prioritize Google and SEO there, organic efforts there, search engine optimization efforts there, but not just for the keywords relevant to your business, but also for an ancillary or a miscellaneous neighboring set of keywords which have much higher keyword demand pattern and are still relevant for your target persona. Yeah. Now, moving on, I'm just going to give you a quick sense of what we did at Healthify Me. As part of our mobile marketing efforts, Healthify Me was and continues to be a app-only business and an app-first business. The website is just a corporate information repository. And the key elements of the mobile marketing recipe that we use, obviously Facebook, because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, was the number one. Big culture shock for me when I first joined. It was a huge surprise that Facebook was the number one. But over time, Google became a close number two, and I'll tell you how. So when we used Google 4 or 5 years back, Google introduced something called as UAC, Universal App Campaigns, which essentially became the only de facto way for advertisers to run mobile marketing efforts, app install ads, right, on Google. A lot of advertisers, when this was first launched, they hated it, right? There was a lot of pushback from advertisers because in this, you essentially had to say, in Google Baba, we trust, and give up all control. Because advertisers were used to control as digital marketers, but here people had to give up control. You had to tell Google, you had to give them the Play Store listing, the iTunes listing, your creators, and then you could of course define your overall sandbox, saying that I want to target only India. And then it is up to Google and Google's machine learning AI-based, neural network backed algorithms to run the ads, to make the determination of whom to target, when to target, with what creative. You had no control. Now, when we first launched UAC campaigns on Google, it was very underwhelming. The results were very poor. ROI was extremely poor. But what we did was we persisted with it, and we did a really good job of something called as instrumentation of the Google Pixel, which is a small piece of code which Google provides, which you can paste in your apps or your website's code at various points, at various milestone events that your prospect goes through as part of their engagement life cycle with your app or your website, with your brand in general. And you can send information. So whenever this piece of code gets executed, it sends information back, anonymized, aggregated information back into the Google ecosystem. Let me try to simplify this by giving you a simple example. Anjum, I apologize, I'm going to take your example again. Let's say that Anjum comes and installs the Healthify Me app. She goes ahead and registers on the app. Now Anjum has just completed an upstream event of engagement on the Healthify Me app. Right, she's just, because that is fairly early on in her life cycle of engagement with the app, right? She's just completed an upstream event. Now I send this information without any personally identifiable information about Anjum, anonymized, aggregated information. I send it back into the Google ecosystem through the Pixel. Now Anjum continues to use the app. She's had a plate of aloo paratha for breakfast. She's gone for a 5-kilometer jog. She continues to consume news on the app, etc. That information again is sent back into the Google ecosystem midstream event, right? Which again is sent back, anonymized, aggregated. Eventually, Anjum purchases a 6-month yoga plan, for example, on the app. Again, a downstream event, very important. I send it back to Google. And what I tell Google is, Google, listen, I like Anjum. Find me 100 more clones of Anjum, right? Who exhibit the same digital footprints, the same digital kundali as Anjum. Go find me 100 more people. Now, Google again, looks for all of those people who have the same, who exhibit the same kind of digital browsing characteristics as Anjum, without using any personally identifiable information. It tries to serve the ad to those prospects who are essentially kind of digital clones of Anjum, so to speak. Now, Google's AI and machine learning algorithms' ability to find these digital clones in the beginning would be fairly limited when it has a limited scale to play with. But when at Healthy Family, we continue to persist with USC campaigns, and over time, our scale grew. And we were able to provide Google not information of not just one Anjum, but 1,000 Anjums. And we said, go find me the next 100,000 Anjums. And the machine learning algorithms accuracy was a lot better because it had more data to play with. It could learn more, it could learn better and predict with better accuracy. So our ROI started improving. And over 3 successive quarters, it became a very close second to Facebook in terms of its ability to drive ROI. And this is what I popularly refer to as inside-out targeting. The traditional form of customer targeting is outside in, wherein you as a business owner, as a marketer, aap decide karte ho, saying that this is my ideal customer persona and inko mujhe ad target run karni hai. But as in this, you are letting data decide, and you're letting user behavior patterns in your own app decide who is your ideal customer persona. They either challenge your existing hypothesis on who your customer is, or they validate some of your existing hypothesis. In Healthify case, hame laga tha ki millennial hai our ideal customer persona, but it turns out it wasn't. Our data proved us wrong. Our outside in targeting suggested millennial, but the inside out, the data behavior patterns on the app, which we are feeding into these ecosystems and optimizing for these events, that proved us wrong. It said that people who are older than the millennial age bracket, people like me, right, they were the ideal customer persona. Because the older a person is, obviously the more unhealthy that person is, probably the person is more concerned about his or her health, and the fact that they also have a greater spending power. And that was the insight which came through for us as well. Some of the other things that we did a really good job of ASO, it's called App Store Optimization. You can think of it as SEO, Search Engine Optimization's cousin, but for the App Store world. So all of the efforts that you as a marketer, as a business owner undertake to make sure that your app's organic listing bubbles up on top for relevant user searches on the App Store and on the iTunes Store is referred to as ASO. And at Healthy Family, we've done a really good job of this. So even during months and quarters when marketing dollars were really hard to come by, our scale never dropped because we've done a really good job of App Store optimization. And then of course, in-app marketing. And in in-app marketing, again, the way we used to do it was for specific high probability of conversion user cohorts, we targeted them with specific interventions. And we had a lead scoring algorithm on the basis of which we did it. We knew using historical data that people who logged in from a tier 1 city, from a Mumbai, for example, they converted better than people coming in from Surat. People who came in with a pre-existing lifestyle condition of a hypertension or a diabetes, they converted better than people who did not. People who used an iPhone, they converted better than people who used an Android. So using data points like these, we created a blended lead score. And for the high lead score cohorts, we targeted them with specific in-app marketing hooks, which would engage and nurture them across their life cycle with the application. For example, we used to target specific cohorts with interventions that said, are you interested in a 7-day free trial? Are you interested in a 1-hour no strings attached diet consultation with my top nutritionist? Things like these. We did a lot of email marketing, more of that when we get into the Simply Learn example. We also did something called as accelerated mobile pages, AMP, which essentially is a simple infrastructural tweak which you can make to your mobile website's front-end code to make your mobile website load really quickly. And this is very important if you want to rank higher on mobile SEO rankings. Yeah. Shifting tracks now and focusing on engagement and nurturing. Let me do a quick time check. I think we're doing okay. From an engagement and nurture perspective, what were some of the things that we did at Simply Learn? And what is engagement and nurturing in the first place? Engagement and nurturing is about working with your existing pipeline of prospects. New acquisition is about getting more and more new customers, increasing your top of the funnel. Your classic marketing funnel is this, right? Where you've got traffic which comes on top. You've got leads in the middle, and you've got paying customers at the bottom. We call it a funnel because as you go further and further down, it gets narrower and narrower at the bottom because you have people dropping out, right, at various points in the funnel. Now, you've got new acquisition on the one hand, and you've also got the opportunity to work with people who have already entered your funnel. How do you engage and nurture them so that you can monetize them better? How do you engage and nurture your existing customers? Through various touch points: email, WhatsApp, SMS, browser notifications. That's what engagement and nurturing is about. Now, let's try and break this down with a simple example of how we used to do things at Simplilearn. Let's say that Anjum, once again, she's interested in, say, picking up a digital marketing program at Simplilearn. She wants to learn digital marketing. She comes up and signs up for learning digital marketing at Simplilearn. On the first day that she signs up, which is day 0, so to speak, she gets an email, SMS, WhatsApp, browser notifications, etc. Welcome. Congrats, Anjum, on having taken the first step in building your career in digital marketing. Welcome to the program, etc., etc. A few days after that, Anjum gets another, touch point, email across multiple channels, etc. that says, Anjum, by the way, here are some latest and greatest blogs on digital marketing, which you might be interested in, which has been specifically handpicked for you. Nothing salesy in both of these emails, right? No, nothing which says go ahead and buy now, click here, buy now, no discount code, no coupon code, nothing. Yeah. A few days after that, Anjum gets another email that has information of testimonials of people just like herself, right, who have seen career advancements, pay rises, promotions, after having taken this course, which is what Anjum gets. A few days after that, Anjum gets an invitation to a webinar just like this one, which is conducted by an industry expert, which again helps her build a lot of trust and credibility towards the brand. A few days after that, that is when the brand comes in for the slam dunk, right? The brand sends her a 20% discount code saying, Anjum, this expires in 48 hours, buy now, right? So as you can see, this is the classic, what is popularly referred to as drip engagement lifecycle that a brand does with a prospect, right? It's called drip because they're very similar to water dripping off a tap, one after another after another. These communications go out one after another. And these are essentially looking to engage and nurture and warm up that prospect before the brand tries to go in for the kill, which is the sales pitch. Now, if this email had been sent, say on day 2, Anjum would have marked this email as spam and ignored this email. But what the brand has successfully done is they've engaged and nurtured the prospect over their life cycle of engagement with the brand. Now, all of the efforts that you as a marketer undertake to make sure that you can automate all of these interventions, saying on day 0, this needs to go out, on day 4, this needs to go out, on day 7, this needs to go out, on email, SMS, WhatsApp, etc. All of this template needs to be used, etc. can be done through something called as a marketing automation platform, right? And this can be set up using marketing automation platforms. I've just given you a bunch of different names, which are very popular names when it comes to marketing automation. You've got HubSpot, which is the world's leader. You've got Acton, Marketo, Salesforce, the world's leading CRM tool, also has a marketing automation module built in. But unfortunately, most of these are prohibitively expensive, unaffordable for early stage startups and bootstrap companies. I'm giving you here some more value for money names, Active Campaigns, and closer to home, some Indian brand names, Freshworks, which has a product called Freshmarketer, Zoho, and of course, WebEngage, which are more affordable. Plus, they've got support teams based in India, so you don't have to speak during unearthly hours with a support person in case something goes wrong. So if you're an early stage startup, you can very well use any of these products, and you can look for one of these more sophisticated platforms as you scale. Now, engagement and nurturing can help a brand in a couple of different ways, right? One is as part of the transaction lifecycle itself, by aiding in conversions, like in the Simplilearn case, right, where Simplilearn engaged and nurtured Anjum as part of the transaction lifecycle and made her a paying customer, convert kiya Anjum ko into a paying customer. That is one way. But Simplilearn has the luxury of knowing that their average sales lifecycle is around 4 weeks. Sales lifecycle is referred to as the average time it takes for a prospect to become a paying customer. वो 4 हफ्ते हैं Simplilearn में, वो पता है through historical data. So Simplilearn ke paas, they have the luxury of time. It's like a test match, right? They know that Anjum is not going to go away anywhere for 4 weeks, right? They know that they have the luxury of time to engage and nurture Anjum. But what happens if you're, say, Domino's Pizza, where the average sales life cycle is probably 5 minutes? Now, Anjum is looking to order pizzas online. She's hungry, she's impatient, and she's not going to wait for beyond 5 minutes. So there is no time for me to engage and nurture Anjum. She'll already go and make her decision with a competitor. Right, so 5 minutes of it's like a T20 match, right? I just have that 5-minute time window to play with, so I can't really do much as part of that transaction. That transaction is gone. But what I can do is, I know that, let's say Anjum is a vegetarian and she loves paneer toppings. right? So the next, and after the purchase is done, I can keep sending a regular communications across channels, which talk about the latest and greatest paneer topping flavors that we have at Domino's Pizza. So the next time Anjum doesn't want to cook at home and she wants to order pizzas online, Domino's is top of mind, right? So you can use engagement and nurturing to promote customer loyalty, stickiness, repeat behavior. In cases where your sales life cycles are very, very small, for example, Make My Trip for flights, right? The average sales life cycle is probably 30 minutes. People are in a hurry. So you need to use engagement and nurturing to primarily to drive repeat behavior and stickiness and brand loyalty. The third use case, of course, is also important, which is for refunneling users. I spoke about the marketing funnel, which is this. You have people who are dropping out of the funnel all of the time. How do you put them back in to the funnel? That's very important. So for example, at Simplilearn, we used to have this concept of quote unquote dead leads, right? These were people whom the sales team had tried their best and given up on, not because they were irrelevant, but just because they didn't quite have the propensity to pay right then and there. So we used to have a separate series of drip communications crafted specifically for them every 6 months, where we used to go back to previous 6 months valid dead leads and we used to try to refunnel them and to monetize them. Likewise at Healthify Me, we had these hibernating cohorts, people who had the app on their phones, but they never launched it in the last month, right? So how do we get them back? How do we reactivate them? For which one of the things that worked really well was live content. So we used to have Instagram lives, which we used to stream live on the app. And we used to send push notifications of this, featuring our top nutritionists talking about a trending topic, trending health and fitness topic, about the dangers of crash dieting, say the advantages of keto diet, advantages of vegan diet, advantages of vegetarian diet, etc., advantages of having fish, things like these, right? So we used to have specific, sessions like these, which used to be streamed live on the app, which is something that, which was a great hook for me to refunnel users back and reactivate hibernating cohorts. So that's a third use case for engagement and nurturing. Now I understand most of you here are business owners and you don't enjoy marketing jargon as much as dhande wali terms, right? And you understand more business centric terms, and you understand terms like top line and bottom line, a lot better than marketing jargon. So in simple terms, if you had to try and explain why is engagement and nurturing so important, there are two strong reasons. The first is, and I don't know about your organizations, at least all of the business owners that I've interacted with, they've always felt that the sales team is their most favored team. The business owner looks at the sales team as the guys who bring in the money. And unfortunately enough, and I have to admit this despite being a marketer myself, when they see the marketing team, they see them as the people who end up spending their money. Through engagement and nurturing, you can make the sales team that much more productive, which means you're obviously, as a business owner, you're going to be very happy. Let's understand this with a simple example again. Let's say Anjum runs a company which has a 5-member inside sales team, each of whom can make 20 calls a day and they work for 20 days a month, which means they can make around 2,000 calls in a month. And let's assume, for simplicity's sake, for the purpose of this example, that each of these calls equals a unique prospect that they're getting in touch with. So they can get in touch with 2,000 prospects in a month. But what happens if, say, Anjum's pipeline is 10,000 strong, right? So how does the sales team know which are the top 2,000 to call from this list of 10,000 prospects? That's where the power of marketing automation comes in. That's where the power of technology comes in. So what Anjum's team can do is they can send marketing communications out across channels for all of these 10,000 prospects and create a blended lead score based on the behavior that each of these prospects exhibit for these various communications. This person clicked on my email, this person opened my email, this person came to my website, visited my pricing page 5 times, this person registered for my webinar and attended the webinar. So on the basis of all of these behavioral signals, I can increase the lead score for a lot of the prospects. And what I can then do is, what the sales team can then do is, all they need to do and is sort the 10,000 prospects in descending order of lead score. So I now have a blended lead score created for each of these 10,000, which is a numeric number. The greater the number, the greater is the probability or the propensity of that prospect to become a paying customer. Now, all the sales team now needs to do is they need to sort it in descending order of lead score, call the top 2,000. Now, this has two benefits. A, the sales team is only spending time with those prospects who have a higher probability of conversion. So their productivity goes up. That is one, which means greater top line and revenue for the business. So the top line is looking a lot rosy. The business owner is happy. The other very good byproduct of all this is that the sales team is not spam calling the remaining 8,000 people. So the brand equity is not being eroded by getting in touch with those remaining people who are not quite ready to make a purchase decision. So two very strong benefits there. Moving ahead, the other reason, and I cannot stress this enough, is that all of these marketing automation platforms, right, are by a factor of 10,000 more cost effective than cost per click CPC or CPM, cost per 1,000 impression based platforms like a Facebook or a Google or other remarketing platforms. So which means that for the same marketing spend, you can acquire the same or greater volumes of new customers, which means that your cost of customer acquisition comes down, which means that your bottom line starts looking better. So for two strong reasons, you should, as a business owner, you should consider engagement and nurturing efforts. One, increase top line, and the second, improve bottom line. Yeah. A quick pro tip when it comes to engagement and nurturing, and this is a question that I'm often asked. In the Simplilearn case, we send the emailers out for around 18 days, right? So the duration of your engagement and nurture efforts needs to be for around 3/4 of your sales life cycle. As I said, the sales life cycle is defined as the average time it takes for a prospect to become a paying customer. In the Simplilearn case, I know that number is 4 weeks through historical data. So it would be stupid on my part if I were to send Anjum 5 emails in 2 days. She's going to mark me as spam. Or if I sent her 1 email every month, then she would probably end up shopping from a competitor. So I need to balance it in such a way that I send my marketing communication out for around 3/4 of my sales life cycle, by which time I would have warmed up the lead, and then the sales team can come in and close the sale. It's like a relay race where the marketing team runs with the baton for around 3/4 of the race and then hands it off to the sales team at the home stretch to come in and close the sale. If I were to say Infosys, which is in the B2B space, where the sales life cycles are maybe 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, there following the Simplilearn approach of sending 5 emails in 18 days would be stupidity, right? So there I would be better off sending monthly newsletters. Yeah. So that's important for you to keep in mind. You've got to warm up your prospect for around 3/4 of your sales life cycle. That's a good strategy for you to follow. Now we're going to look at the topic as like I mentioned earlier, a topic very close to my heart, the need for driving repeat business. And I'm going to start off by taking the example of one of the earlier organizations that I was involved with more than a decade ago, which was back then one of India's leading top ethnic wear marketplaces, online ethnic wear marketplaces, before Flipkart and Amazon launched their slew of Indian ethnic wear clothing. And this was a company that essentially sold to the Indian diaspora NRI audiences living abroad. So if you're living in Toronto, London, Detroit, Dallas, Australia, and you want to have a lehenga or a sari, right, or a sherwani, it's very difficult to get high quality Indian tailoring options. So this brand used to take the customer's body measurements, and according to the customer's requirement, you would stitch that product and ship it to the respective location. The India market was fairly low because in India, the touch and feel barrier is high. You have access to high quality tailoring, right? In every single street, you've got a tailor, right? Unlike abroad. And that was the primary USP of the brand. This was a brand that healthy brand, and still is, by the way, which had positive cash flows, positive gross margins, EBITDAs, etc. Unlike a lot of e-com unicorns in the country, it made real money. But the problem was it had very low repeats, very high ASP, right? Average selling price. People used to buy a $600, $700 lehenga or a sherwani or a sari or a kurti, etc. For a Diwali or for an Eid or for a Lodi or Lori or for a wedding in their family or for a shadi, and they would disappear for 2-3 years, never to come back. Which was a big problem. So what happened was when we were looking to raise funds from venture capitalists, a lot of VCs felt that the business was inherently risky because the business was absolutely and solely dependent on new customer acquisition only. It was like customers were coming in through one door and leaving through the other, never to come back. There was very little repeat behavior built in, which made the business very risky, which was a problem for us. And while the business still continues to do well, it has never been able to achieve the kind of hockey stick growth that a lot of businesses aspire towards. Fast forward several years, at Simplilearn, we were faced with a very similar problem statement, where again, Simplilearn is a company which has strong EBITDA, strong gross margins, high average selling price, right? The prices are around $15,000-$20,000, which is pretty high in the Indian context. But the problem was low repeats. So if I've just convinced Anjum to spend $15,000 of her hard-earned money in a digital marketing program, it's going to be a pretty difficult conversation for me to convince her to spend another $15,000 in another course, right? So that was a problem statement. And we solved that by introducing the concept of a learning path and pivoting the brand around that. Here, we successfully managed to turn this around, unlike the previous example. So what we essentially said was, I'm not just in a transactional relationship with the prospect. I'm not just a training partner for the prospect, but I'm a career planner. I have crafted, Anjum, for you a bespoke, customized learning path, right? Which essentially you're here at the base of this mountain. Let's say that you're in the marketing track. You want to get to this aspirational peak, which is the CMO role. right? Or you're in the data science track, and your aspirational peak is the chief data scientist role. You're here at the base of this mountain. You've taken your first course. You need to take these 2-3 other courses to get to this peak, where you need to complete a master's program, which was sold at 50,000 bucks, 3x the average selling price, for you to get to that aspirational peak. So essentially, it was a bundled offering, but we didn't pitch it as a bundled offering. We essentially said, this is a learning path that I have crafted for you, and we targeted specific users. Existing customers of Simplilearn with this particular pitch. We had a lot of repeat drip emailers which we created for this, and over 3 successive quarters, after sustained efforts over 9 months, we managed to move repeat revenue contribution from existing customers, a contribution to month-on-month revenue from virtually 0 to around 15%, which was completely incremental ground up growth. Yeah. Moving on, we're almost down to the end of the presentation. I'll give you a sense of, as a business owner, as a marketer, what are the various ways and means by which you can create brand exposure, digital brand exposure for your business. Now, I'm going to show you 3 different ways in which you can create brand exposure. The first 2 are already very popular. Logon ko samajh aati hai. And this is, unfortunately enough, these are the major ones that are used in India. Unlike a lot of other developed markets, where people also use the third form of brand exposure creation, in India, it is not used enough. And I urge all of you to use this a lot more. Yeah, let's look at what all of these are. And we're going to understand this as a simple example. And Anjum, I'm going to take your example again. Let's say that Anjum runs a company. She has a Facebook page, which has 100 followers. And she makes a post. She doesn't spend any money in promoting it. She just makes a simple organic post. When she makes that post, all 100 of them end up seeing it. This is referred to as owned media exposure, because this is her own followers to whom she's got her brand exposed to. Now, this is of course simplistic. We know that Mark Zuckerberg has gone on record stating that on Facebook, organic reach tends to 0 as your scale grows. So which means that when Anjum has 100 followers, she makes a post, 80 of them might end up seeing it. When she has 1,000 followers, she makes a post, 500 of them might end up seeing it. When she has 100,000 followers, 20,000 of them might end up seeing it. The reach starts lessening as your scale grows, which is Facebook's own way of nudging Anjum to start spending money on the platform, right, through sponsored ads. But for this example, for simplicity's sake, let's assume that all 100 of them end up seeing that ad, seeing that post, right, without any money being put out. This is owned media. Yeah, fairly straightforward, well understood. Now, let's say that Anjum spends 10,000 bucks and she gets exposure to, again, it's not a one-on-one, 1:1 correlation. Again, simplified just for this example, she gets exposure to 10,000 people. And now this is referred to as paid media. Yeah. And she's got access to this, the 10,000 people who are not her followers, but she's got access to this only because she has spent money. Yeah. Now, the third form of exposure creation, which is extremely hard to achieve and not used enough in India, is the fact that, let's say, Anjum's team has done such an awesome job, and they've made a piece of content which was so interesting, so engaging. She's not spent any money in promoting it. And when they posted it, out of her 100 followers, 50 of them loved it so much that they ended up resharing it on their social media platforms. And each of them had 100 followers each. So Anjum's brand has now got exposure to 50 multiplied by 100, 5,000 incremental eyeballs, which are not her own. It's not own media. It's not stuff that he has paid for. So it's not paid media. This is something that Anjum's brand has earned through the strength of a content. That's why it's called earned media. Now, social media shares are a great way for a brand to drive earned media. There are other ways as well. Another very popular way is PR, right? Let's say Anjum gets featured in an interview with the Economic Times. Now, Economic Times readership is not her own. It's not own media. She's not paid for it. It's not an advertisement or an advertorial. It's pure editorial coverage. So she's got access to that readership through the strength of her brand, the strength of the work that they've done. So again, it's earned media. Another way is through third-party discussion forums. Now, there are threads on Quora where people are asking about which are the top payment gateways in India. What does neo-banking mean? Where can I get access to working capital line of credit? Now, as a brand at Razorpay, in a non-salesy fashion, that's important. And each of these threads have 50,000 views each. I have the opportunity to insert my brand into that conversation in a very subtle fashion by adding value to the thread. Now I'm getting access. My brand is getting exposed to all of the people who are viewing that thread. It's not owned. It's not my own. It's not paid. I'm not running ads on Quora. It is something that I have earned through the strength and the relevance of my intervention. Yeah. Now, when it comes to social media shares, there are various ways. For example, at Razorpay, we have done hashtag trending campaigns on social media where we've asked people what are their hacks for unlocking growth in the post-pandemic new world order, for example. We've asked them to tag the brand, use this hashtag, which has created a lot of earned media for the brand. At Healthify Me, we have done New Year resolution campaigns. Every New Year, people take health and fitness resolutions, right? So we've run New Year resolution campaigns where we have crowdsourced from the Twitterati what are their New Year resolutions for the upcoming year. At Simply Learn, we've done something for hashtag career wish for the upcoming new year. And we've also packaged a lot of this and given it out to press, saying that we've packaged it as an infographic, saying these are India's New Year resolutions for the upcoming year. These are India's career aspirations for the upcoming year. And the media has lapped it up because this is not data coming from us. This is data that is publicly available on social that we have curated and handpicked and given it to you on a platter. And all we ask for is credits in return, right? So that's something that's worked well for us. And if we're talking about social media shares, we need to talk about virality, that highly abused term, virality. And if you're talking about virality, we certainly need to talk about what was probably one of the first instances of something going viral in India's social media ecosystem, which was the famous Kolaveri D song almost a decade ago. I'm sure most of you would have heard and must remember the Kolaveri D song, and of course Gangnam Style, which happened slightly before that, which was a global viral phenomenon. Both of these were due to a lot of earned media creation. While a lot of us would be aware of Kolaveri D, not a lot of us would be aware of some of the backroom workings that went into making Kolaveri D the viral phenomenon that it actually became. Take a look at this video, which gives you a sense of that.
How much money do you think is required to make a song world super hit? 10 million? 20 million? We spent zero. Close the mouth, I'll tell you how. First, we shot the making of the song and then added subtitles for all the non-Tamilians. Then the most important, we added the collar ringback tone code for making some pocket money. We then put up the video on our YouTube channel and then seeded it on social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. To get the audience watching and talking about our song, we created a hook, hashtag why this Kolaveri D, which is a commonly used phrase in my state, Tamil Nadu, when somebody irritates you. Next 3 days, full tweeting different irritating situations with the hashtag why this Kolaveri D, but we also added the link to our song with it. So people who could relate to that irritating situation clicked on the link, watched the song and forgot their irritation. They also understood the usage of the question, why this Kolaveri D? And then they started tweeting about things which frustrated them with the hashtag and also added the link to our song. Basically, people love venting their frustration on social media, and we use this insight to get hashtag Kolaveri trending on Twitter over 3 full days. Even people like Amitabh Bachchan ji and Anand Mahindra ji tweeted. The YouTube views kept on increasing. People were viewing, sharing. More than 41 million views across 220 countries. People love to ape a trend. So we put up a candid video of our own people singing the song in chorus, following which hundreds of people put in their own versions. Some even organized flash mobs, not just in India, even Netherlands and New Zealand. Oh, and by the way, the total collar ringback tones downloaded was 2 million and still counting. This brought us so much revenue that we are still counting actually. Okay, the enormous online buzz pushed even TV and print media to talk about the song. Articles were written on blogs, tabloids and even newspapers. It was featured in news channels and music channels. Every radio station in the country played Kolaveri. In simple words, earned media is estimated to be more than 67 million rupees only. Money spent, zero. Mission accomplished.
That was a pretty interesting video. We can play a quick game of truth or dare. There's actually one thing that this person has said which is actually the truth, and one thing that the person has said which is not quite the truth. Any guesses on what they might be? The truth is, of course, the hashtag why this Colavery, which they used, which was the glue which made their product relevant for the masses, which was a very cool thing that they did. The falsehood is the fact that they spent zero in promoting this, and I know for a fact that they spent some money in promoting it. It was not in your regular kind of advertisements, which are overt, which are very obvious, but this was more subtle. They spent it in influencer marketing. They spent it in seeding the content. They paid some influencers to tweet about this, etc. And that's how most things that go viral. Even Gangnam Style that goes viral work, right? You need to give it that initial level of paid push, paid marketing push, paid media creation, so it reaches that critical mass of early adopters, critical mass of eyeballs. After which, of course, assuming that the content is inherently viral, inherently strong, the crowd takes over through social media shares and reshares, and you can take off the paid media injection. Right? It's like a rocket that's looking to escape from this gravitational pull. It needs to reach that minimum level of escape velocity for it to fly free. Right? It's very similar to that. That's what happened in this case as well. And in the case of Gangnam Style, where there was some money that was spent initially. Yeah, that's all I had for you. I hope this was useful. The last 1 hour was informational. It was value additive. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Would love to take any questions.
Yeah, what a wonderful insights, Veda, and I'm sure we are ready to take the questions. So in case anyone has any questions, they can either post them in the chat box, or even I think can just unmute and ask. Nobody has any questions.
I think there was like one question on the chat. Manish Kumar Vaidya has asked me which bid strategy should I use on Google. That's an interesting question. So Manish Kumar ji, I think there are multiple bid strategies that you can use. There is of course broad match. It's a slightly more technical topic. There is something called as broad match. There is phrase match, and of course there is exact match. You can use multiple kinds of bid strategies, and it depends on what is the kind of category that you're operating in. Now, if the category or the space that you are operating in is fairly well understood and mature, then my recommendation to you is you can still experiment with broad or phrase match, which are slightly cheaper in terms of CPC. Broad match ka matlab ye hai ki even if somebody doesn't need to search for that exact keyword that you're bidding for. Let's say you're bidding for t-shirts online. Even if somebody enters t-shirts online as part of a larger query, your ad will still show up. Whereas if you did exact match, it will show up only if somebody searches for t-shirts online without any typos with those two words in that particular sequence. Yeah. Phrase match ka matlab hai ki t-shirts online, if that phrase is there as part of a larger query, it will still show up. So in your case, agar category is well understood, logon ko samajh aati hai category pe, then in that case, you can still use broad match. If the category is very niche, people don't get what the category in it is itself, then you're better off using more, exact match. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, Gaurav, I'll share the slides with Anjum so that she can circulate it to the entire team. I hope that works, Anjum.
Please do. I will share with everyone. Thank you so much.
Initial reach should be organic. So yes, for my point was on things that are going viral. Right, for things that have to go viral, except for, this is commercial things, right? Of course, there are other kinds of news, etc., that goes viral. I'm talking about specific content pieces which a business is looking to put out. For all of those cases, you do need that initial level of paid marketing injection for it to reach that initial cohort of users, right? Which is say 100,000 people. After which, assuming that the content is inherently viral, you can even stop the paid marketing. The crowd will take over through social media shares, and earned media will take over. Yeah. Sahil has a question. FMCG customer, it's a new brand in healthy foods. What would you suggest? So in this case, Sahil, if it is a new brand, if it's in the FMCG space, I think you should use the same framework that I mentioned. Are you mass or are you niche? Given that it is healthy foods, I'm assuming you're not very mass, right? It's going to be fairly niche. And given that in this case, very similar to Healthify Me, you are essentially enabling people to discover healthier and fitter versions of themselves. That's very close to the identity of that individual. Personal connect, zyada hai. I would suggest you look at Facebook. From an influencer perspective, micro or bigger ones. Micro influencer ka matlab hai for the larger audience, people who are like you or me, who have limited social media following but have very strong engagement. Macro influencer का मतलब है somebody like an Amitabh Bachchan, for example. That is an example of a macro influencer. So in this case, so one rule of thumb for you to consider, Sahil, is what is your primary objective? Are you looking for greater relatability and trust for your brand, or are you looking for more glamour quotient and aspirational index for your brand? Now, obviously everybody wants both, but you need to think about what is the number one priority. So if it is more of relatability and empathy, then you go in for micro and trust. If it is more for aspirational and glamour quotient, you go in for macro. Think of it that way. So at Healthy Family, for example, we launched a product specifically for pregnant mothers. Right there, trust was very important. Relatability was very important. So we didn't go with a macro influencer. We used a micro influencer, which was again a team of pregnant moms or young mothers who had just given birth to children. Right? That was what we used. It would have been, we didn't want to use a macro influencer, right? And pay big bucks. We wanted to, because here trust and relatability was more important. Whereas we look at Myntra or Nykaa, which are in cosmetics and fashion, they use more macro influencers. So that's important for you to keep in mind. I hope that helps. I wish you all the very best. Gurmeet has a question. How do you make, Gurmeet, how do you attempt budget for digital marketing? How is ROI estimated? So budget, Gurmeet, so one thing that I often tell a lot of startups that I advise and I mentor is that initially aap kuch spend mat karo. Right? Extract the maximum ROI possible from organic, extract the maximum ROI possible from earned media through the strength of the content, SEO pe focus karo aap. And these are not magic pills, right? Overnight success nahi milega aapko. This will take you at least 6-9 months for you to start seeing some results, but invest in these channels, invest in customer referrals, right? Instead of spending money on Facebook and Google, get your customers to refer, and these channels convert a lot better. Now, if Anjum had to see an ad, Anjum had to get a reference about a brand from a friend, a person that she knows and trusts, she would consider that a lot more credible than seeing an advertisement on Google or Facebook, right? Uspe spend karo aap. However, let's say aapke dhande ke liye it is important and there's time is of essence. You need to acquire a set of new customers or early adopter customers jahan pe aapko product market fit validate karni hai. And I know it is a little bit of a chicken and egg, a catch-22, right? You need that initial set of customers and you need them quickly. You could start off with some small paid marketing experiments. It could be as low as $5,000 also. That's a beauty of paid, right? You can run a campaign and you can turn it off really quickly if things are not working. You can start it off in as much of a budget as you can afford. And I think if you are just starting off a business, what I would suggest is run the campaign till you get around 50 to 100 customers or leads, and then validate your product market fit with those folks. Try to engage and nurture those folks. Don't spend any more money. And then once you have confidence in your conversion, in your product's value proposition, then uske baad usko scale karo aap. Uspe, run a subscriptions model if you can to build stickiness, run customer referrals, etc. Yeah, I hope that helps. And then his question was on ROI. ROI is measured through conversion rate, which is the most important thing. And for any business, and this is the other question that Karan also has, right, on CAC, which is cost of customer acquisition. Very simply put, CAC refers to, let's say you spend 10 lakhs in marketing and you acquired 1,000 customers in the month. Your CAC is 10 lakhs divided by 1,000, which is $1,000. Yeah, and 10 lakhs is, yeah, it's $1,000, right? And that's what CAC is. What is the cost it takes for you to acquire one customer? 1,000 customer ke liye 10 lakh laga, ek customer ke liye kitna hai? 1,000 rupees. Now, the ROI can be measured in multiple ways. One is obviously conversion rate at individual channel level. And one rule of thumb is marketing spend should not exceed more than, say, 20-30% of your revenues. But the most important thing for you to consider for your business to know if your business is trending in the right direction is your something called as the CLTV to CAC ratio. Customer lifetime value, CLTV, to the CAC, cost of customer acquisition multiple. वो ratio कितनी है? Very simply put, अगर आप ₹1 खर्च कर रहे हो आप for acquiring a customer, how much return do you get at a gross margin level for that ₹1 from that customer over a 3 or 5 year time frame? वो 3 या 5 गुना ज्यादा होना चाहिए. So your multiple needs to be 3x or 5x plus, right? So and that is calculated as what is the impact through repeat transactions that customer does. Ideally, you should acquire that new customer once. उसके बाद that customer should repeat transact with you. वो पैसा आपको बार-बार खर्च करने की जरूरत नहीं पड़नी चाहिए. Which is why you use engagement and nurture channels where you don't have to get the customer to, you don't have to pay CPC and CPM cost. Right? So that's why the CLTV CAC multiple is very important for you to gauge. I think Karan's question is on what kind of CAC can you expect in fashion and apparel. It's very difficult to say, but in the B2C space, I think you can expect a CAC of around $1,000. That's always difficult, Karan. If it is a new product, it's going to be difficult for you to estimate lifetime value. You need at least some kind of runway. So what I would suggest you do is get that initial cohort of early adopter customers, even if you don't know CLTV. See what kind of stickiness they exhibit in your business over 3-6 month time frame, then project it for the remaining time. So let's say you do this for 5 years, right? CLTV is calculated over a 5-year horizon. 60 months के लिए पहले 6 महीने actual data ले लो, बाकी 54 months के लिए you project basis the data. And of course, as initially your projections would be way off, but over time, as you get more and more information of actual data of your customers on your platform, this projection will start getting better. Hope that answered your question, Karan. Wish you all the very best. Any other questions from anybody else?
I think there is one more. No, I think there isn't. So I don't think so.
How to increase rankings of single phrase keywords? Manish has just sent me a private message. Sorry, I think we can take this last question, Anjum, if that's okay. Single phrase keywords. I'm assuming Manish, your question here is on SEO. How to improve SEO rankings? SEO rankings you improve by 2 high-level strategies, right? One is what is referred to as on-page SEO. Second is off-page SEO. On-page SEO का मतलब है कि on your website page, what are all the things that you can do to improve your content's relevance, improve your user experience on that page, make the page load really quickly, right? How can you keep the content very fresh? अगर आपने content update करके 6 महीने हो चुके हैं, for example, right? Google is not going to give, it'll lower your pages rankings. So that is all of the efforts that you undertake on the page is referred to as on-page SEO efforts. There is also off-page SEO effort, which is all of the efforts that you undertake off the page, where you get, say, a Times of India, an Economic Times, or a popular blogger to actually link back to your page, which again improves the credibility of your page in Google's eyes. So both on-page and off-page SEO effort is important for you to start improving your rankings. Hope that helps, Manish. Back to you, Anjum.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful session and an amazing session. And I am extremely confident that everyone must have taken much value from this awesome masterclass. I would now like to invite Mr. Hitesh Madan, President TiE Chandigarh and co-founder Hit Bull's Eye and Mindtree Chain of Schools for the vote of thanks, please. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anjum. And in fact, when I was listening to this entire conversation and the session, amazingly good, because I have been working in EdTech for almost 7 years. We're a bootstrap company, and trust me, every bit of what you said, I could really relate and feel. And I must compliment that in industry, there are very few people who are knowledgeable. That's what we find. A lot of people have more gas, but there's more fluff rather than the real stuff. So today, thankfully, we were able to get something very good examples, whether it was a Coolability video or your insights about whether it was a marketing app or to how to drip down your lead nurturing is very, very important. I still remember in one of the icons we had twice invited Pradeep. Pradeep is a digital marketing expert, and I think his session was well attended. In fact, today are the times where we are under COVID. So I'm very sure the moment COVID opens up, we'd love to have maybe a 3-hour full workshop from you, maybe in ISB like a setup. And I'm sure we from Chandigarh in the SME ecosystem, because a lot of here are only SME and startup, will be benefiting from this kind of a workshop. But today it was an amazing session, and I'm very sure people from TiE ecosystem, they have learned a lot. And thank you for volunteering, coming up on Saturday and enlightening us with your I say ocean of knowledge which you have. You could just extract few I'll say bucket from it. And maybe in future, we look forward for a few more buckets from your ocean of knowledge. Thank you very much, Veda, from TiE Chandigarh and from my personal side.
Thank you so much, Hitesh. Thank you for those kind words, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So we now look forward to hosting you at IIT Chandigarh in person.
Absolutely.
And
Look
soon.
forward to that. Look forward to that. Chandigarh is one of my favorite cities in India. So look for beautiful place. Look forward to coming there sometime.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We look forward
Take
to
care,
having
folks.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Take care. Bye bye.
Stay safe. Thank you so much. Thank you.